I feel like mental illness is like one of the hardest things for a person to deal with. Because no one can see that you're in pain. No one can see that you're in pain. No one can see that you're suffering. Unless you do something drastic. And if you do something drastic, that usually doesn't end very well. And there's so many different stigmas about mental illness, like you can just wish it better, or mentally disabled people are dangerous, that we just need to try harder. That there's just something we're doing wrong. Sorry. And I feel like the worst thing a person can say is that's like it doesn't exist. Because you'd never say that to someone with no legs. You'd never go up to them and say, why don't you just try walking? And every time I try to use that analogy, people say that I'm overreacting, that mental illness isn't nearly as severe as not having a set of legs. And that's another thing. People don't take it as a serious thing. It's very serious. And honestly, depending on the mental illness, it could be the same amount of crippling or even more crippling than not having legs. I wanted to talk about my personal experience, but it's hard. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to get attention from people. I'm just hoping that this can help others to understand what mental illness really is. I'm not going to go into the details, but I suffer from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is different than regular post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is someone reacting to a trauma that they've endured. Trauma is usually something like seeing someone die, being in a car crash, going through sexual abuse or rape, witnessing something tragic. People who saw the 9/11 attacks have PTSD. People in other countries most definitely have PTSD. It's a very common disorder. However, complex PTSD is much more severe. The difference is that someone with complex PTSD was trapped for a long period of time, and they were constantly being traumatized and had no way to possibly escape. Some examples are prisoners of war, people who've been tortured, people who've been kidnapped for long periods of time. It's usually the things you'd see in horror movies. And it's terrible that people's lives are actually these horror movies. You know, people, like, it's entertaining watching horror movies because, I don't know, some part of it is just like, well, this can never happen. But it does happen. And when it does, it can change that person's life forever, for as long as they live. Because of my trauma, I will probably never be able to go out on my own. I'm applying for Social Security benefits for disability, but it's harder for people with mental illnesses. I'm probably going to have to be in psychotherapy for the rest of my life. I'm going to be on medications for the rest of my life, medications that alter the way I feel, the way I act, the way I think. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to have a job or just be an independent person, to be able to do things that anyone would naturally want to do with themselves. I have trust issues. I have nightmares. I have flashbacks. That's right, flashbacks. And my flashbacks take the form of pseudo seizures, which are seizures, but there's nothing physical in your brain that causes them. It's completely your subconscious. So there's no medication you can take that will get rid of them. There's no unnatural brain activity going on. My body is completely safe. It's just me that's on the floor seizing. And these pseudo seizures for me can last. They usually last between 5 and 10 minutes. The longest one was an hour and a half. Sometimes during these pseudo seizures, I don't even shake. I'll just be completely limp. And the sometimes I'll have a pseudo seizure, and this was still when I was figuring out my illness. I was alone, and I had one of these pseudo seizures, one where I wasn't shaking, so it just looked like, I guess, that I was asleep. And when I woke up from my seizure, my underwear had a hole ripped through the middle of them. And it hurt to walk. That is one of the very large number of times that I've been sexually assaulted or raped. It's hard for me to become emotionally attached to people, but it's extremely easy for me to feel lonely and depressed and loveless, worthless. And so the two kind of conflict with each other all the time. I don't know if I'll ever be able to have a normal relationship. I just don't. I don't know how I'm ever gonna be financially independent. I don't know. I just don't. In all honesty, I am afraid all the time. I may have legs, but there's so much that has been taken away from me. And to be completely honest, I would trade my legs and my arms to get them all back. To feel like a whole person worthy of respect or even love. I would trade anything for that. Anything. I don't want pity. No, I don't want that at all. I want people to try to understand that when someone says they're feeling depressed, that when someone says they're triggered, that when someone says they feel uncomfortable in an otherwise completely normal situation, like even just walking outside. You should listen to them, because you never know what could really be going on inside of their heads. And ignoring them is the exact same as making a person without legs get out of their wheelchair and walk with you. I want people to know that mental illnesses are just as crippling as any other physical disability. And it's a shame that I even have to make a video like this, that anyone does, in order for people to understand that. And the stigma just makes everything so much worse. So much worse. It can cause someone to feel like life is unbearable. Mental illness, I don't want to say it's dangerous, because people will get the idea that people dealing with mental illness are dangerous, but I mean to say that mental illness is just as serious and can be as dangerous as a physical incident or trauma. Like, someone who commits suicide because of their mental illness, don't blame them. They are not cowards. They are people struggling to live in a world that doesn't see them. Someone jumping off a roof is the equivalent of the final beep on the heart monitor, where the line just goes steady. Nobody blames the person in the hospital bed. So don't blame the person hanging from a window or smashed to pieces on the sidewalk. The same way someone battles cancer, people are battling their own illnesses in their head constantly. I'm not saying this to belittle any physical illness. I'm saying this to enlarge the severity of mental illness. If you're watching this, and you're dealing with a mental illness, I want you to know that you're not alone. If you're watching this and that you have a loved one who's dealing with mental illness, I want you to know that you are not alone. If you're watching this and you have no idea if anyone you know has mental illness, try opening your eyes. And if you still honestly think no one does, at least try to understand the stigma to help erase the stigma. Because it can't keep going on like this. I can't keep watching my friends die because people won't even acknowledge that they're hurting. I have lost 3 people in the last year. Please don't add to that number. Okay, that's about all I wanted to say. Thank you for your time, and good night.